We have yet another stimulating week full of planetary transits. In this week's astrology, Mercury will shift into retrograde motion, allowing us to make sense of the Sagittarian themes we've been experiencing over the last 3 weeks. There's also a new moon in Sag at the end of the week, which can motivate us to seek better opportunities. The Sun's making a trine with Mars this week, which denotes the countdown to this planet's regressive motion. And Mercury is making the most alignments over these next 7 days, causing us to work on our mindset and scenarios involving miscommunication. So even with the interesting mix of transits we have, the vibes on the graph are very minimal. We only have 2 on the graph this week. We have good luck energy from the 25th to the 28th, which will also intersect ambitious tones. So even though we only have these few vibes on the graph, it's a time to take advantage of the motivational energy that's going to be with us. Some of that's going to be from that Sun trine Mars situation, loosely the Venus quincunx Jupiter situation, but we also have some hard alignments too, which generally pushes us to take action on things that have been sitting on the back burner for a while. But yeah, even though Mercury's in retrograde this week, we'll feel encouraged to take care of things that need a revamp. But either way, we're in for another colorful week. Let's look at these next bunch of days and see what we can expect. Don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps this channel grow. Also, if you're looking for a natal chart reading or intuitive coaching, the links will be in the description box below. And if you'd like to support the work of this channel, you could do so by buying me a fresh cup of coffee. The link will be in the description box below as well. Monday brings in our final Mercury retrograde of 2024, and it'll take place in the sign of the Archer thoroughly. I say thoroughly because the year before we had a Mercury retrograde in Capricorn and in Sagittarius. This one is going fully through Sagittarius this time, which could also bring us some unresolved stuff from last year as well. And by last year, around December or so, going into January. Another thing to note is this retrograde might feel shakier than typical because Mercury happens to be in a sign that it's not exactly able to be comfortable in because Mercury rules Gemini, and that happens to be the opposite of Sagittarius. And so with a combination like this, we can run into snags. For this reason, we might be heading for a glitchier period with this Mercury retrograde than typical. Sure, Mercury retrogrades are associated with glitches. It's associated with technological things not going right, paperwork, sign-ups, paying attention to detail, communication, our mindset, and also our ability to retain information. And so with a pairing like this, it may feel more challenging with this type of energy. Also, with the alignments that this Mercury retrograde is going to be making, it can feel uncomfortable. On top of that, this Mercury retrograde is going to be in tandem with the Mars retrograde. Mars is going retrograde on the 6th of December. And also, these planets will be making aspects to one another in their retrograde forms. They've been doing this, the pre-shadow for Mercury and the pre-shadow for Mars. So it might feel like there's some out-of-pocket moments and a few mishaps here and there thrown in for good measure. But now this is a time to review the last 3 weeks regarding Mercury and Sagittarius energy with this retrograde cycle. So think back to November 8th. What was occurring for you regarding Mercury and Sagittarius themes? Has this been a time where you're realizing that you'd like to move beyond your restrictions? Maybe you're coming to a realization that you'd like to embrace the freedom-loving parts of yourself and just get connected with that inner free spirit of yourself. Or wanting more adventures in your life, wanting more social action in your life, maybe getting to a place where you have more of an open mind about different perspectives or different types of people because you're needing a little bit more from your social life overall. Maybe you're coming to a realization that you'd like to put yourself out there more and take more risk and shoot your shot at more opportunities, and now's the time to kind of come up with some sort of plan that's going to actually work for yourself later on. Sometimes taking these types of risk and moving beyond restrictions is getting on a better path for yourself because you're ready for a new journey. You're ready for a journey that's going to lead to fulfillment or expand your horizons in some sort of way. And so you're now considering ways to make that happen for yourself because you're ready to enhance your life. Within Sagittarius energy, our higher perspectives come into play. And so this might have been a period where you're looking at getting back into education. And what that means is that could be going back to college, that could be starting college, it could be taking courses, it could be finding ways to expand your mind, maybe learning from coaches or finding ways to become a coach yourself and taking the certifications needed in order to get that on track for yourself. This could also have been a 3 weeks of considering shifting philosophies within you as well. So there might be a change in terms of your beliefs, in terms of attitudes about things, your opinions about things. Maybe you're having to rework that in some sort of way. And sometimes within this energy, when we're dealing with the retrogrades, we could have been dealing with problems in terms of belief systems, where maybe it's become problematic in the sense where it's led to dogma, or it's led to just losing your faith and your belief in anything at all. And so this pre-shadow period, and then of course this retrograde period, might be a time to work on those things. Energy like this can also show where we might have been blowing off responsibilities or turning a blind eye to serious problems because maybe we're just not wanting to deal with anything that's so serious and something that's going to put us off, something that's going to feel burdensome, more or less like too much hard work. Sometimes on the lower vibration of Sagittarius energy, and with a combination like this going into a retrograde, it can point out where we might have been avoiding problems that we really need to take care of because they've piled up and now really need our attention. And this can also lend itself into reckless behavior as well. Maybe we're catching ourselves with that and we're realizing we need to rein that sort of thing in as well. Sometimes this is pure carelessness. Sometimes this is impulsive behavior. Sometimes this is literal reckless mouth syndrome. I mean, we're dealing with Mercury and communication, and so there may have been some situations that could come up during the retrograde where our mouth has gotten us in trouble, because within a combination like this, sometimes our brutal honesty might come out, and it may come out in a way that upsets others and ruffles feathers, and we might have to do some damage control during this retrograde period. Maybe these things came out in the form of being absolutely rude, and that could look like intellectual arrogance in this energy. It could look like being overly preachy, and it could look like literally saying some real mean shit. And so that's another thing that we need to be aware of during this retrograde that could come up. And also, speaking of reckless behavior, this can show us where we're overbooking ourselves, which is a form of self-sabotage and can really be reckless on our systems. It could be really careless of us because we could be overpromising and under-delivering, but not only that, maybe suffering from burnout, from trying to cram everything into our schedules that can't possibly fit. And tying into that, this may be a period to work on flakiness as well, because sometimes that disorganization can lead to not showing up for others, and even something as simple as replying back to another person may seem like too much, and we might just kind of bow out on doing that at times with others, leading to strains in the relationship and just more misunderstandings. The signs that'll feel this retrograde more than others will be the mutable modality: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, between 6 to 25 degrees of these placements. So if you have planets or chart points in these signs, you'll feel this retrograde more than others. Mercury goes direct on December 15th and will exit its post shadow on January 3rd of 2025. From the 26th to the 28th, we have a few Venus alignments occurring. Tuesday brings in a Venus quincunx with Jupiter situation, which may show us where we have a disconnect between moderation and going overboard. And that could be our relationships, that could be our romantic relationships, our platonic relationships, that could be with finances, and that could also be with overindulging in enjoyable things. And because this is a quincunx, it's definitely showing us where we have blind spots with going over the top. But one thing to note, this isn't really the hardest alignment to have, but it can get problematic at times. If anything, it'll bring some jolliness to the air, which is much needed, but we might have to check ourselves if we're going overboard in terms of some of these behaviors that I was just mentioning within relationships, finances, and over the top things in terms of enjoyable stuff. Energy like this could look like drama in relationships for drama's sake and needing more validation than someone can possibly give. It could rev up situations and point out where we're overspending. And it could be a time where we're just wanting more sweet treats than typical. Venus-Jupiter combinations, especially the hard ones, bring out the urge for candy, cookies, pies, chocolates, and that sort of thing. And it revs it up to a higher degree. I mean, most of the time people like those things, but this definitely keys it up more so than typical. And it's also coming right on time too, because here in the States we have Thanksgiving, a time with all that socializing and celebratory vibes which Venus and Jupiter bring together, regardless if they're in a hard aspect. The celebratory vibe of this can really rev up that mood of just going overboard and overindulging in sweets and also other fun things. But for the most part, this is the easier of the Venus alignments this week, because by the time we get to the 28th, we've got Venus making a square with Chiron, and that one can bring up a lot of situations about insecurities in relationships and scenarios where we're self-sabotaging in order to have the approval of someone. And so this can show us where we've gotten caught up in unhealthy unions and other relationships that have been damaging to us and lead to a sense of gloominess and just feeling down about the situations, but also having us considering ways that we can work on this so that way we're not finding ourselves in these types of situations. Circling back to the 26th, we have more Chiron stuff going on. The sun's going to make a Sesquiquadrate with Chiron, and this could be a period where we're looking to uplift ourselves because the mood might be low. It may fluctuate considering we have some other alignments that might actually mitigate that. Like I was saying, that Venus quincunx Jupiter situation, it's problematic, but at least it's jolly as opposed to outright gloomy. But another mitigating factor is also the Sun trine Mars situation, which I'll get to in a moment. But with energy like this, with the Sun Sesquiquadrate Chiron, we may feel like our self-esteem is plummeting. Maybe it's a day where the wind gets taken out of our sails and we just feel deflated for whatever reason, and we're having to find ways to pick ourselves back up so we're at least back to baseline again. And if this has been an ongoing thing, this might be a time to find better coping strategies and ways to build our confidence up, maybe finding the reason why certain situations may trigger us, and other situations that dampen our self-esteem and sense of self. But 24 hours later, the sun's going to make a trine with Mars. And what this means is Mars is going retrograde in the next 9 days. Anytime we have trines from the sun to the outer planets or Mars, it marks the beginnings and ends of the retrograde periods. Now, of course, we're in the shadow phase of Mars, and this will start off the beginning period of its retrograde. So it will go into its station in 9 days and mark the beginning phases of what will become the retrograde motion for this planet. So the cool thing about this alignment is it brings on a ton of encouragement. So if we've been feeling a lack of motivation, if we've been feeling down, our cheerful nature may return in a way that comes in full force. This is where we were seeing some of that ambitious energy and that good luck energy, because this is going to get us moving. Despite the fact that this planet is pre-shadow and that we have a Mercury retrograde occurring, we're still going to feel motivated to get things done. And as a matter of fact, have the energy to go over things that really need our attention. So alignments like this are great for breaking free from stagnation, tapping into our true potential, and feeling somewhat encouraged or courageous or confident about ourselves. And one of the reasons why we feel like this is energy like this is very empowering. And so it helps us feel like our old selves again, like we have those moments where we remember exactly who we are, allowing us to feel self-assured enough to take charge and action on whatever it is that we're trying to create. This also lends itself to an adventurous tone. This also lends itself to a social tone. So if we've been just not wanting to deal with people and needing space to ourselves, this may help us in terms of wanting to be in the company of others. Speaking of others, this brings out a passionate tone as well, so it has some bit of a romantic side to it. So this could rev up flirtation, intimacy, or just the urge to go on adventurous dates. So even though this is part of the retrograde phase, it is a jolly part of the retrograde phase. Mars will go into retrograde on December 6th. From the 29th to the 30th, we have some Mercury retrograde transits occurring. Mercury is going to make a semi-sextile with Venus on the 29th, and it's going to sesquiquadrate Mars on the 30th. So here's the thing with this Mercury-Venus sextile situation, semi-sextile situation. It has edge to it. It's not one of the hardest alignments. That's that Mars situation that we have coming up, but we still need to ground ourselves if we are doing something that might be a little bit out of character within this energy. In other words, it can rev up the need for validation. It could rev up expression that's not exactly the most genuine, meaning maybe we're getting sweet talked or buttered up by somebody whose words aren't grounded in reality and basically superficial and being used as a way to reel us in. So insincere compliments can be plentiful in energy like this. And it also brings in a shallow tone in terms of romantic communication. And this is, of course, with unhealthy situations, unconstructive situations, or just getting to know someone and really not knowing their real intentions. But otherwise, it brings on a social tone and just having fun and being lighthearted. But some of the things to watch out for were the situations that I just mentioned. Then once we get to Saturday, we've got the Mercury sesquiquadrate Mars situation, which we'll be feeling over the whole entire weekend. We'll start feeling this one on Friday. And so it'll blend in with that Mercury Venus situation. And it'll blend in a way where communication can go very wrong. There can be a lot of scenarios where we may not be articulating ourselves well and it comes off completely wrong. We're saying the wrong thing, we're putting our foots in our mouths, leading leading to disagreements. Also, temper-wise, we might be fed up with something and finally speak our mind, which is not a bad thing, and definitely not in this energy. Sometimes this energy calls for us to stand up for ourselves, especially if a situation was festering for a while. It could be a time to speak up on those things. But unconstructively, yes, this can lead to arguments and bickering and dealing with people who like to get a reaction out of other people by provoking them and egging them on in order to get them to fight back. And mix in with that Venus situation I was just mentioning, maybe a compliment that's insincere gets called out or goes completely wrong and it leads to an argumentative situation. So yeah, interesting week with a colorful mix of transit. And like I said last week, at least we're getting some reprieve, at least we're getting breaks, at least it's not all hard transits. We're getting a few easier ones thrown in for good measure that can help mitigate some of these wild situations. Anyway, I hope you all have the best week ever. Later, and see you in the next episode.